This mattered not at all to Reagan because he wanted to close what he thought was a gender gap. And in fact, if you recall, for those of you alive at the time, 31 years ago, he said that, he wanted to find the best woman for the job. He wanted to make history to appoint the first woman to the court. Sandra Day O'Connor had a consistently pro-abortion record. This was known. It didn't matter to Michael Deaver, one of the president's aides, who was very close to Nancy Reagan. It didn't matter to Nancy Reagan. It didn't matter to James K. Baker, the president's chief of staff at the time. It didn't matter at all. They weren't blindsided. Just as George Herbert Walker Bush wasn't blindsided about David Souter. Again, Howard Phillips testified how Souter, when he served in the hospital, in the case of a hospital board of trustees, I believe it was in Vermont, voted to permit so-called elective baby killing on demand in that hospital. He had the blood of the innocent dripping on his hands. Nobody cared, ladies and gentlemen. John Sununu, who has been going around campaigning for Romney lately, former governor of New Hampshire and chief of staff of President George Herbert Walker Bush, and later a host on Crossfire after Pat Buchanan ran for president in 1995, I believe it was. Sununu replaced him there. It might have been earlier when Pat ran the first time, although I think it was the second time in 95, 96, I could be wrong. But Sununu, so we were blindsided. You weren't blindsided, John. Howard Phillips testified. Come on, quit this nonsense. Gordon Humphrey vouched for him. Gordon Humphrey was wrong. Senator Gordon Humphrey was wrong. It's incredible, the delusions that people believe. Anybody, those of us who pointed these things out, oh, you're the problem. It's nice that being called, I had a lot of preparation for being criticized by those who are fully traditional, because if you take a firm anti-exception stand against surgical baby killing, and point out that no one is truly pro-life if anyone supports a single instance of the direct intentional taking of an innocent human life, you get criticized there. Well, you get used. You teach an academe among the people who give you complete freedom to agree with them. Imagine just teaching in a department full of Barack Hussein Obamas, huh? Well, I've done that. And these people in these traditional chapels who like to criticize their own, they presented problems publicly after they've been presented privately, ought to get it through their heads. Some of us have had experience being criticized for a very long time. So what? You get criticized. Big deal. You offer it up. If it's unjust, everything gets revealed on the last day. If it's just, well then, maybe there's some cause for self-reflection. I know I've been given cause for self-reflection many times in my life. But oh boy, we got criticized in the 80s for standing up to all this nonsense. All those of us who did. But Reagan appointed Sandra Day O'Connor, and she was a consistent vote in behalf of Roe v. Wade. An absolute consistent vote in behalf of Roe v. Wade. By February of 82, I believe it was, I was speaking to a friend of mine from St. John's University. He graduated, I think, in May of 72. I graduated in January of 73. And he was working for a bank, and I guess he's still working for that bank. I've not been in contact with him for about 12 years now, but I pray for him and his family every day. Very, very fine man. And he said to me, look, Tom, as I was complaining about Reagan not moving the ball in pro-life, he said that, look, if Reagan gets the economy going again, they'll give him everything he wants. And I said, no, they won't. We'll never get the economy truly going again and fix the federal budget and fix budget deficits, which were then astronomical, if we don't do something to try to retard the killing of the preborn under cover of the Civil War. I say that again now, 30 years later, nearly 31 years later. It's the same thing. You think Romney is going to do what Reagan did, and at least Reagan spoke about the issue at the State of the Union address. He spoke about it campaigning. And famous line with John Anderson in their debate, I believe it was September 20th to 21st, 1980. Jimmy Carter refused to participate in that debate. He only reluctantly agreed to debate on October 27th, 1980. In Cleveland, Jimmy the Appeaser Carter never saw a communist nation he couldn't appease. In 1980, I'm no friend of Democrats, folks. I'm not a Republican, but I'm no friend of Democrats. I pray for President Carter. But Carter only agreed to appear to debate him when he was in trouble electorally, and his pollster, Patrick Cadell, who told him 2 days before the election that it was over, that Carter was taking a bath. And he might have come, Pat Cadell was a good man. Pat Cadell came into him and told him it was over, which is why he quickly conceded the race. It was around, 8 o'clock at night, 8:30 at night on that Tuesday, November 4th, 1980. But Reagan, but if you think that Romney is going to do that which Reagan would do, Reagan at least, but in a famous debate in 1980 with John Anderson, the independent candidate, Republican congressman from Illinois, who ran for the Republican nomination and lost to Reagan, and he was supporting abortion, although one time he had opposed it. And Reagan had that great line, "John, isn't it funny? All of those who oppose abortion are already born." Now, Reagan would talk about it. Romney's not even talking about it. And you think he's going to do more than Reagan, who did very little, and the little that he and his successor, who didn't care about it at all, George Herbert Walker Bush, who was in the hip pocket of Planned Parenthood when he was a congressman from Texas. He had a certain name, which I won't even use, a nickname, because he was in the hip pocket of Planned Parenthood when he was a congressman from Texas, from Houston, Texas, after the 1966 election, after his failed Senate race in 1964. Well, no, it was his failed governor's race in 64. He failed for the Senate in 1970 against Senator Ralph Yarborough, and then was able to, against Dwight Benson in 1970, and the little good that was done in the Reagan-Bush years, the little good that was done was just undone by several strokes of the pen by William Jefferson Blas Clinton on January 22nd, 1973, the 20th anniversary of the decisions of the Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade and Roe v. Bolton. Several strokes of the pen. He not only reversed Mexico City, he reversed other things. He permitted fetal stem cell experimentation. He permitted there to be the testing of the abortion pill, or the human pesticide, the French abortion pill, RU-486, which George Walker Bush did not reverse. He could have directed its reversal, but didn't. Oh, no, for reasons I'll get into a bit later on. And the little good that Reagan and Bush, the elder, did to reversed. Several strokes of a pen. That's the same thing with Obama coming in, January 22nd, 2009. Several strokes of a pen. Anything Bush did, which wasn't much, gone. It's all written in sand, folks. It's illusory. But at least Reagan spoke about it. Spoke about it. Romney's not going to do that. The fear of Obama, the fear of Obama, the fear of Obama. People go to sleep when men like Romney get in, and they think all is well, but evil is still being institutionalized all the more. Well, there is no political, constitutional, legal problem, solution to this, folks. You at least have the obligation to speak about it, to try to change hearts and minds, and if you fail, then you lose, so what? But at least stand up for something. Just simply don't run a campaign of pure utilitarianism so that a nicer version of Obama can get elected. It's madness. Well, Reagan not only didn't do much, But he continued to advance the careers of pro-aborts within the Republican Party. He campaigned actively for Robert Packwood in a primary in Oregon, the egregious, horrible Robert Packwood, pro-abort, unapologetic, shameless pro-abort. In 1986, how is one going to help restore illegal protection to the preborn when you work for the election of those who are opposed to that, as a matter of principle? It's a disconnect, folks. George Walker Bush constantly said he wanted to work for the day where every child will be welcomed in life and protected by law. Well, that was contradictory because he believed that there were some instances, rape, incest, life of the mother, where children could be killed. How could you say that he was working for the day in which every child would be welcomed in life and protected in law, when he believed the law could permit the surgical dismemberment of children in certain cases, the direct intentional surgical dismemberment of children in certain cases? Mr. Bush, I pray for you too. However, it's illogical, it's irrational, it's without foundation, which is why Bush, when debating Alan Keyes in 1999, December of 1999, in a debate in New Hampshire, prior to, and that cycle's madness of 99-2000, when Alan Keyes was pushing him, Dr. Keyes was pushing him on why he permitted exceptions. He says he's pro-life. How can he make exceptions that permit the surgical dismemberment of children in certain cases? And Bush said, and I will always remember this, he kind of shrugged his shoulders with that arrogant kind of shrugged and smirked and said, well, I can't explain it, it's just the way I feel. These are your national pro-life leaders, folks. Wake up, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Please wake up, please. You have been deceived and sold a bill of goods. Now, I'm told by the time that Reagan left office that by those who know him, that he had come at least privately to oppose all abortions in all circumstances. That's very good. Unfortunately, what John, and I'll use his title, Cardinal O'Connor, the Conciliar Archbishop of New York from March 19th, 1984 to the time of his death on May 3rd, 2000, that John Cardinal O'Connor, when he met with me privately in his residence on Madison Avenue in the borough of Manhattan in the city of New York, when I was running for Lieutenant Governor of New York in '86, he said something that was very true. He said, Tom, if the president had moved as hard on pro-life, as hard on abortion, as he had on aid to the Contras and helping the Contras, we would have gotten somewhere. We might have gotten somewhere. The Cardinal was right. Despite my disagreements with him on many things, as I came to understand where he was wrong, and I would become a critic of his within 10 years. It was a very astute observation. Also, the political capital was expended on Star Wars, on defense spending. I'm not saying that wasn't important in the 80s, but when Republicans have wanted to do things, they've done them. Reagan has wanted to do things. He did them. George Herbert Walker Bush wanted to invade, wanted to have a war per the first Persian Gulf War, to expel Iraq, the forces of Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. After our ambassador, April Glaspie, had given mixed signals that we wouldn't do anything if he went in there. Hussein, who had been our ally, or at least was slightly allied with us during the Iraq-Iran war, we saw him as a wedge against Iran, which is why Reagan's special envoy to the Middle East visited Hussein in 1983 and agreed to sell him stockpiles of chemical weapons that were later used against the Kurds in northern Iraq, after the Persian Gulf War. And well, that special representative's name was a man who would later be part of calling Hussein part of the axis of evil in the Middle East when he was defense secretary under President George Walker Bush. That fellow was Donald D. Rumsfeld, by the way. Just know your history. Know how you've been sold a bill of goods. When George Herbert Walker Bush wanted to invade Iraq, wanted to have that Persian Gulf War, he had it. They put in witnesses who perjured themselves before congressional committees saying all sorts of atrocities were going on that they had not witnessed, that they had manufactured or exaggerated. And, George Walker Bush, weapons of mass destruction, all of the buildup. After the book written by Bob Warburg was also chronicled, and he's not always my favorite, obviously, but he wrote a book about the build-up to the Iraq War, to the invasion and occupation of Iraq in 2002, 2003, the build-up in 2002, the invasion that took place our time, March 19th, 2003, but it marched Feast of St. Joseph, the Solemnity of St. Joseph, in March 20th, 2003. And this needless, unjust, immoral war. Iraq posed no legitimate national security threat. At a cabinet meeting after 9/11, Bush said, "I just feel it in my bones that Iraq is behind this." Or Hussein, "You feel it in your bones?" All of the buildup. They moved heaven and earth, the Patriot Act, to give the government more power. They move heaven and earth when they want to. On the babies, it's rhetoric, if it's that, and with Romney, it's not even that. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen? Vote however you want. If you want to vote, Pope Pius XII said there's an obligation to vote. True, but, as Father Peter Scott and others have pointed out, there are qualifications. Pope Pius XII must be adhering to Catholic principles. And it's for even those who have defended, obviously, it's papal teaching, the teaching, have said, yes, there is a prudential judgment involved. But those who wrote in the 50s didn't see clearly the trap of naturalism that we're in. We see that more clearly today. I didn't see it clearly in the 80s. Even in the early 90s, I didn't see it clearly. In the early 90s, until after 92, I supported Pat Buchanan and I worked hard for him in the primary process in 92. I supported him as hard as I could, and even more in 95 and 96. And again, not my disagreements with Pat, but at least he would have stood up for what he did stand up for what he believed in a general election. He would have given Bill Clinton some pause for rhetorical concern. Pat doesn't need advisors to tell him what to say. He doesn't need focus groups. Again, I have my disagreements with Pat on some issues, but at least the man has his own mind. He has a mind, and it's his. Disagree with him if you will, as I do on some things. But, these politicians, no. When they want to do something, they do it. When they don't want to do something, they don't do it. Constant support for pro-abortion politicians. And we get to the case, and I'll spend some time, rest of the time, on this presentation. Then in the final part, this will be a 7-part series. What do you want from me? All right, come on. I get going, I get wound up. I don't have a classroom. I'm dead tired from having dealt with this upload business for the 3 or 4 people, 50 people, whatever going to view these videos. Hardly anybody will view them prior to tomorrow. But at least I've recorded, and I'll get back to my recording, Living in the Shadow of the Cross, later this week, or certainly by next, after getting caught up with some other work. Now, in 2000, which was then considered to be the most critical election of our time, Texas Governor George Walker Bush was the anointed one of the pro-life movement, just like the mainstream pro-life leaders, just like Robert Joseph Dole Jr. had been the anointed one in 1996, even though he was inarticulate and mercurial. And anyone who knew anything about him knew this. I saw him interviewed when he was the chairman of the Republican National Committee, I believe, in 1972. He was on Interest and Answers, and Bob Clark was the host then. And Sam Donaldson, I believe, also was interviewing in those days on Issues and Answers on ABC. and it was their Sunday discussion program. Those were on in the afternoon in those days, not Sunday morning. It's become the new church for many people. These Sunday discussion programs, I don't watch them, we don't have television, I wouldn't watch them. I refer to them, I look at the transcripts now and again, but it's incredible. People, political junkies, make that their Sunday rather than going to Mass, if they have a true Mass to go to. But if they knew anything about that, that is. And but Dole was inarticulate. 1972, when he was then just, what, 49 years of age? Not even 50? That's the way he debated Mondale in 1976, and Mondale beat him. Mondale, of all people. Senator Walter, later Vice President Walter Mondale defeated him in the debate, and Mondale once lost a debate with a Eureka vacuum cleaner. He wasn't the most stirring rhetorician ever known on the face of this earth. Anyone who knew anything about Dole knew he didn't believe in anything. Then, 73 years of age, everyone rallied around him. Oh no, vote for the electable candidate. Ralph Reed and Pat Robertson and Father Frank Pavone told people, vote for the electable candidate. Pat Buchanan can't get elected. Well, anyone who knew anything about politics knew that Bob Dole couldn't get elected. Well, maybe Pat wouldn't have been elected in '96, but as I've indicated, he certainly would have articulated issues far better than Dole did. It helped to follow politics a little bit. In that way, and have a memory about it, in that way to know, gee, maybe we're being sold a bill of goods by the Republican establishment that wants the pro-life issue to go away. By 2000, by the time Bush had run, Republicans in the mainstream, so-called, had essentially made their arrangement to do as little as they could. We'll keep the pro-lifers happy with that plank in the platform, that no exceptions plank in the platform. That means absolutely nothing. But under the administration, under the presidency of President George Herbert Walker Bush, his chief political advisor, who later converted to, while he was dying from brain cancer, Lee Atwater, converted to Catholicism at the hands of a man who was a good friend of mine, and with whom I worked very closely for a long time, Father John Hardin. Father Hardin, Tom, how are you, Tom? How about a big blessing, Tom? I could probably record Father Hardin audios. And I have a former friend of mine in the Conciliar Presbytery somewhere in west of the Alleghenies and east of the Rockies. I shall not further identify the individual who does a pretty good Father Hardin impression. He does the impression of many people very well. But I shall say no more on that one. It's west of the Alleghenies, east of the Rockies, south of the Great Lakes. Give you a little idea, just a general idea there. But Father Hardin received Lee Atwater, who made David Axelrod seem tame by comparison. The political guru of President Obama, really the brain behind the man who's lost with the teleprompter talking about revenge and defeating one's enemies. Sal Alinsky's adherents believe they have enemies, and they've got to defeat them because they alone stand for justice, they alone stand for the people, although they don't know anything about the people because they don't know anything about God. If you don't know anything about God, you don't know anything about the people. Sorry about that, Mr. Axelrod. But Atwater floated, of course, the thing of the approach of the Big Tent. The Republican Party was the Big Tent. Let's have the Big Tent on abortion. We can have pro-aborts, we can have pro-lifers. There are things we can agree to disagree about. You can't disagree upon fundamental issues of morality. Sorry about that. Direct innocent taking of an innocent life is not something you can disagree about. It's not a difficult issue upon which people of goodwill may legitimately disagree. What do you say about that again of anti-Semitism? Those who legitimately hate Jews, not people who seek their conversion. I'm called an anti-Semite because I criticize those. I criticize Judaism as a false religion, and I urge those who adhere to it to convert. And because I point out that much of the evil promoted under cover of the civil law today has been promoted by those who are Reform rabbis, Reform Jews, adherents of that branch of Talmudic Judaism, and that if you point this out, as Hugh Akins has done in his book, Synagogue Rising, then you're an anti-Semite, you are a problem, you're a hater. No. But there are people who actually hate others and wish them harm. People who are legitimate racialists, people who believe in white supremacy, which is a condemned ideology. Pope Pius XI in his encyclical letter that condemned the racialist ideology of the Nazis, Mitbrennende Surge, March 17, 1937, condemned every racialist viewpoint imaginable. Those who would believe in the reinstitution of slavery or invidious segregation under cover of the civil law, there would be no place for the big tent in the Republican Party for them. And likely there shouldn't be. But there's plenty of room for pro-aborts, as there was on that stage in Westchester, Ohio. John Warner, Kay Bailey Hutchison, Rudy Giuliani, others. On that stage, not far from where this is being recorded at Union Center Square, the square at Union Center, on Friday night, November 2nd, 2012, the commemoration of All Souls. The big tent, the big tent, the big tent. It was tried out in New York in 1990. Where the Republican state convention there chose a pro-abort named Pierre Rinfret, an absolute non-entity. No one knew who Pierre Rinfret was. An economist who said he had advised Nixon and Pierre Rinfret, a complete and total non-entity. And Herbert London, who was a conservative activist in the Conservative Party and a devout Orthodox Jew. And I pray for Dr. London's conversion. He's a very fine man. And he told me when I was running for United States Senator against Alphonse D'Amato in 1998 in the Right to Life Party primary, that Al D'Amato came up to him, then Senator Al D'Amato came up to him, in the New York State Convention, party convention, to choose the gubernatorial candidate, and he said, according to what Herb London told me on the phone in 1998, he said, Tom, Al told me that, he said, Herb, this is Al D'Amato speaking to Herbert London, you change your position from pro-life to pro-choice, and you'll be this party's nominee. They have made the decision then. London refused. He ran on the Conservative Party line in the state of New York and fell just 22,000 votes behind Rinfret for second place, which would have meant if he had won second place, came in behind Mario Matthew Cuomo, he would have, the Conservative Party would have been in second place on the ballot. The Republican Party would have been a minor party in the state of New York, which is why such a push was made in the final few weeks for people to vote for Rinfret rather than for Herb London. And by '94, a once nominally pro-life state senator from Peekskill, New York, former mayor of Peekskill, was selected to be the person to oppose Cuomo, George Elmer Pataki, and he became pro-abortion in 1990. And even though there was a fully pro-abortion, fully pro-life candidate running on the Right to Life line, Robert Walsh, Bob Walsh, running in Pataki, was deemed, people told me, oh, you gotta vote, you gotta get Cuomo out, you gotta get Cuomo out, you gotta get Cuomo out. And they got Cuomo out. Who do they have now? Cuomo. Andrew Mark Cuomo. What difference? And who do they get after Pataki? The egregious pro-abort Elliot Spencer, who went after crisis pregnancy centers. When he had to resign in disgrace, in utter disgrace, and he's reinvented himself. They all reinvent themselves. And it's like the communist, everybody gets to rehabilitate themselves. No one has any sense of personal shame. And I'm sorry for my sins. Go to confession. I'm sorry. I don't make excuses. I'm sorry. And who's governor after him? The pro-abortion Catholic, David Patterson, kept in perfectly good standing in the conciliar structures. Charles Rangel, a Mason, kept in perfectly good structure in the conciliar structures. Charles Bernard Rangel. 82 years old now. I mean, ethics problems.